Hello everyone, my name is Matt Scorpion, and welcome to the last week of the season, which usually entails some of the same few things, but I'm going to go over it just in case. Now, because of this video, it being the last of the season, aside from the TWID leaving up to the next one, and likely the August showcase whenever that comes about. However, just because of time, I might not make a video on it, I might just watch it and then bask in the season. But because of it, I will be shoving the reset and Eververse all together, so keep in mind I will be doing that. So if you wish to see both, watch till the end of the video. Now, on that note, going throughout the world, as usual with the last week of the season, all three of the playlist activities have boosted reputations. Now, mainly just reputation, there is no boosted loot or anything. So that is to make it so that with all of your ranks, if there was any ornaments, shaders, any limited seasonal, air quotes, exclusive items that you wanted to track down, the last week is the best time to do some cleanup. But aside from that, going throughout the world, now currently starting with the Nightfall Strike, it is currently a kind of farmable one in the Devil's Lair. It's not too hard as long as you got a team that knows what they're doing, and if you spec out for it, it's not too terrible. Of course, all three elemental shields with Overload and Barrier champions expect Hive and Fallen. Then Arc Threat for increased Arc incoming damage, so of course, watch out for Fallen and Hive boomers. Then the usual modifiers of Extinguish, Limited Revives, Arachno so that Fallen Vandals spawn web mines on defeat, and Chaff for no radar in addition to the seasonal overcharged weaponry, and oddly enough, only a Strand Surge, no additional Surge, but then also overcharged linear fusion rifle. So if you had the laser painter from, what's it called, Gambit from this season, I guess that is something that can monopolize on both. Now, if you actually manage to complete a few Nightfalls, get to drop or complete the Grandmaster variant, what is dropping is going to be the Adept Buzzard, which is a vertical kinetic sidearm, possibly one of the best sidearms in the game, especially for PvP. Now, while the Adept roles are, of course, things like kinetic tremors, perpetual motion, and a variety of other things, I think this is a pretty solid option from what I've seen, just based in, well, ease of use for a sidearm. Of course, Grandmaster is required for that one. But then in terms of the rest of the world, of course, the air quotes Gambit update is happening next season, which is a few things coming back to Gambit, so there might be something to talk about then. But then in terms of Crucible, it is currently momentum control with Rift as our rotation, and of course there will be the last Trials event of the season. However, what is rotating out, I believe, has already rotated out for the season, so there isn't going to be any last chance sort of things. I think it might just be another weekend of Adept Immortal before the end of the season, so if the rotations come about, that is everything for that. Now, on that note, going throughout the rest of the world in terms of rotations. Now, the farming raid this week is actually Last Wish. So there's one more week of Last Wish you can grind for in case you wanted the gear from it. Basically, all challenge modes are active. Kali is still incredibly farmable, with glitch or without, because that encounter is honestly easy to farm regardless. And of course, that means Riven is still allowed to be killed at a limited time, so if you want to go for 1,000 voices in case you still don't have it, now is a good time for that as well. Then throughout the rest of the world, now I'm sure you might have noticed just because I stopped covering it, the bait box has still been 3 activity zones. I will double check this at the start of next season just because I'm not exactly 100% sure if it will continue. It might go back to rotation, or it might just be that every zone is max activity, but we'll have to see in case fishing gets any updates next season in addition to that. But starting throughout the rest of the world for our rotations, the actual farming dungeon, on the same note though, is Duality. Yes, it is currently Duality, so Artifice Armor from this raid, or just infinite chances to spawn gear. There's still a few things that you can get craftable out of this dungeon. Of course, Heart Shadow, in case you haven't gotten it. Not the greatest sword, it's still got its own little niche, but at the same time, you won't be missing anything if you don't get it. But then, darting throughout the rest of the world in the raids, for the Garden of Salvation raid, it is currently a Link to the Chain challenge. And then all the way to Europa for Deepstone Crypt. Currently, it is the Core 4, which is 10x challenge. Would definitely recommend this one for a run because then it's just double drops, and considering heavy weapons only spawn from 10x, this would be a good one to go for in case you still need Commemoration or Bequest. While one is definitely more sought after than the other, they still only spawn in that encounter, and of course, red borders, it's an easy cut through. Then, in terms of our Legends tab for everything else, Vault of Glass, we currently have the Strangers in Time challenge, which is basically Gatekeeper challenge. You have to kill the Praetorian and the Wyvern relatively at the same time during the encounter. And then for King's Fall, it is currently the Gaze Amaze challenge, which is Golgoroth. Basically, whoever has Gaze has to be in the field of unstable light for damage when they lose the Gaze. Then, going to the Savathun's Throne World Raid, Vow of the Disciple, it is currently Base Information Challenge, which is currently the second encounter challenge, or Caretaker boss fight, where you have to only grab one thing out of the Dark Rooms and deposit at a time. Then, lastly, wrapping everything up with Neptune and Neomuna, excuse me. It is Illuminated Torment Challenge, which is First Encounter Challenge, which is basically only the person who has the Blessing of Light buff can kill the Tormentors officially. It can still damage them from everyone else, but everything else, you know, there you go. And then Resilience Focused Armor, and of course the usual modifiers. Now, it's usually Arc and Void for the Surge, but it's currently just Strand Surge, so I'm starting to think the final week might just be a little bit different. Maybe some last bit of fun with Strand until last bit of fun with Strand until Suspend is nerfed, and the usual overcharged shotguns entailed. Now, in terms of the rest of the seasonal stuff, like I mentioned, I learned last time that the Defiant Battlegrounds rotates daily, so I won't be thinking about that. But aside from that, we have for Salvage Legend, basically the Hive for the combatants, Site Security, Site Reliability, and then Ordnance Disposal with the Urgotha Taken Ogre and Valkaor Final Boss. Now, of course, I don't know if anyone's actually farming Salvage Legend, so props to you if you need it, but there you go. And of course, deep dives, I believe, will still be a thing. I'm not sure if you'll still get powerful or pinnacle gear from any of these. Actually, you probably won't get pinnacle gear from Salvage Legendary because it'll update to the next seasonal activity next season whenever we figure out what that is. But at the same time, we'll still have Ghosts of the Deep being a pinnacle dungeon next season just because we're not getting a new dungeon. When we get the new raid, however, I believe that also means that Neptune will no longer be the pinnacle, aka permanently refresh for pinnacle gear. Now, on the notes of Neomuna as well, basically it is Liming Harbor for our incursion zone, which also means it is the hard reset partition. And for the weekly rotation mission, it is the Desperate Measures, which is, well, I guess final mission. So there we go, Desperate Measures, final mission, let's go. Then on that note, in terms of everything else throughout the world, now, like I mentioned several times before, the seasonal challenges have been done since week 10. We'll only ever have 10 weeks. But I also recommend that if there's anything on here that you started working on or plan on finishing, I'd recommend doing it now, because instead of like last seasons where we had variety of upgrades earnable through the basic seasonal quests that some stay, the rest will go away. So I would recommend if there's anything you're still working on or just there's a bit left to finish, then I would recommend going for it in this last week, because of course, when the season ends, they'll be leaving permanently, and they will not be recoverable. And on that same note as well, that's pretty much everything for that. Now, talking to Banshee, and I will skip down to Ada for the last bit, because that will be a second part of Eververse. But talking with Banshee's gear, now, a lot of the gear that comes in and out for Red Border Crafting, keep an eye on that, because when we get our Raid Rotator, our Exotic Mission Rotator, a few sets of gear will be added to that will be earnable. Like the Akelos Hand Cannon, I believe they will be allowed to drop craftable, so if you don't have any deep side harmonizers to go for that, that is a way you can earn them. And a variety of other gear sets that have been steadily popping out, but obviously you can't just straight up buy them and that sort of thing. On that note, though, going forward, we have the Gnawing Hunger, a Gambit Prime auto rifle that has been around since season arrivals, but surprisingly enough, hasn't been updated with this season when the rest of the Gambit Prime weapons came back. We also have Judgment of Kelgaroth from Season of the Seraph, excuse me, which is basically a heavy glaive if it was ever not heavy. Then we also have Akelos Hand Cannon, which is a vertical frame. It's got some nice setups for tactical use, but at the same time, it's probably one of the lowest damage output hand cannons in the game. You also have a Taipan 4FR. With Genesis, it's kind of crap, but everything else about it is pretty solid. Liquid coils, range, and everything. But at the same time, it is craftable, so if you want the best setup, I'd recommend just making it yourself. And we also have Royal Chase, which is from Season of the Hunt, which I honestly am waiting for a refresh on these things, just because they are over a year old. As a matter of fact, they're practically 2 years old at this point, and would very much like a refresh on these just for more perks, craftable or otherwise, because it's still one of the best looking scout rifles in the game, in my opinion. Then going into the next set, we have Legal Action 2, which is a solid Hake high impact frame pulse, and also one that I would hope for a refresh soon, just because it's still lacking of an origin trait And of course, if it was craftable, you can get some much better setups on this otherwise, and it's one of my favorite pulse rifles ever. And we also have Battle Scar, which is a pretty solid roll, not gonna lie. Either more mag size, more range, better recoil control, or better just range in general. And while shot swap may not be that great, Headseeker is pretty solid for that. And then we also have Fugue 55, which is a pretty solid PvE damage loadout for more magazine size, 4 times sharp for more ammo, and Focus Fury for more damage, although I'd still think that PvE snipers are still probably in one of the not-so-great states of their life, and I forget if they're getting buffed soon enough, but we'll have to wait and see. And we also have Hand in Hand, which is a pretty solid roll. Now, this roll I would maybe recommend for Crucible, because full choke compressing the pellet spread, light mag for a little bit more range and reload, and then dual loader, which just helps you get more things in there. And of course, elemental capacitor, depending on how you want to play it. But aside from that, it is a pretty solid aggressive frame shotgun. And then we also have memory interdict with this setup is probably not so great, but allegedly, according to some of my friends, this is the best PvP grenade launcher, although this roll has definitely some limits. And then we also have Palmyra B, which is also craftable, so while this roll might not be greater if you want a solid rocket launcher for damage, well, people might say you get Bump in the Night first, but in case you can't get that, this is probably your best bet until then. On that note, time to go over the Eververse store and see everything we have in there. Now, I will remind you, going into Eververse, that of course the seasonal offerings, they will be disappearing from the main store. Now, I'm not saying they won't be in the Bright Dust store, but the version right here where anything from the season, any bundle, anything is available for silver, will disappear from a season until it is reintroduced into the archive. If you don't know with the archive, basically it just rotates around, it disappears for a season, but then is put back into the archive, like to give the timeline for this season. We just got back the gear from Season of the Seraph. Now, while we are waiting for next season, we will be getting the Season of the... Crap, I forgot what this season started with. Season of the Defiance. Everything Season of Defiance will be added into the archive and will be purchasable straight up with silver. But meanwhile, everything from this season will disappear, and the next season will, of course, take horse. And then now, of course, I meant that the Bright Dust store, it still has a chance for random gear to be in there, but we shall, of course, have to go forward and see about that whenever they randomly do happen. With that, on the front page, we have Butterbark from Season of Arrivals, which is one of those weird-looking ones where on some cases it adds a texture, but on other cases it just colors. Like I mentioned before, Root of Nightmare's gear does not take shaders well, so it's kind of hard to tell, but you can really see it with my helmet there. It gives it a weird wood look. Then we also have Atmospheric Glow, which is a green, darkish look, which at the same time, while it doesn't exactly glow, it definitely has a dark look to it. And then we have the Resurrected Shadow, which is basically a darkness resonance spawn-in effect. And we also have wait, hang on, let me try this again. Scrivener's Skipper from this season, which I don't know if it's bundle related or if this is just something random to be added, but it's not so terrible, not that bad looking. We also have the Peace by the Water emote, which is basically secondary fishing, where you just kind of knock out while the fishing's going, and I guess you wake up to realize you fell asleep fishing, and then you get back to work. Then, in terms of the main Bright Dust store, now, we have for our variety on flares, 44 steel from the Season of Forsaken, which, it's weird. On the Root of Nightmare's gear, I almost liked it, in combination with this stuff, but it's also a bit bright. So if you want to look like a copper man, there's a way to go for it. And Butterbark again. I need to seriously make a video to Bungie about, hey, can we stop getting repeats in the store? As well, Laguna Cruiser from Season of the Hunt, which is a pretty solid look if you're trying to be chill about it. If you can see on Quicksilver, it's got some not so... It's a weird ocean vibe. And we also have Argent Territorn, which in some places it glows red, and in terms of Root of Nightmare's gear, it definitely glows red. But in terms of most gear, it's just kind of a nice white silver with a red secondary and mostly dark blue. And we also have a Cabal entrance for a transmat effect, basically just spawning in Cabal Techno. The Cannon Fodder emote, which is being shot out of a cannon from Season of the Splicer. And we also have, again, Resurrected Shadow, again from the front page. Now, going through this, there is one thing that will be different between classes, and I'll, of course, show it. But we also have the Circling Sharks emote, which is basically just being scared of sharks in your pool until they disappear. And then, at least for Titans, we have the Chivalry's Chill for Cadmus Ridge Landscape, which doesn't look half bad, but it also looks a bit weird considering you got an ice beard and everything. Then again, Cadmus Ridge Landscape always look kind of weird. And of course, for the other two characters, there will be something different. And I will be showing the visual right now of what it will be. Of course, one for Hunter and one for Warlock, respectively. Then coming back to it, we also have the digital pet shell, which I guess is a Tamagotchi. I forget what it is, but it's basically a ghost into one of those little pet toys. And then we also have the JJ2 Research Rover, which is supposed to be a part of the submersible set, which blows bubbles when you fly. And then we also have the Rapid Response, which is part of the Armored Response ship set, which it doesn't look half bad, but it also kind of looks like it's a turtle in a weird way. But nice little trail on it. And then we also have the Outrunner, which is the Arbalest ornament in a Neomuna themed style. Now, if you don't remember, this was actually one that was community voted, which means that if you voted for it, this is the one you got. If you're disappointed in what it became, then that's your fault for picking Arbalest and not something else that probably had something cooler to get out of it. And lastly, as always, we have the side-eye ghost projection, which is always the crappiest part of this video, and the ghost projection. And wrapping things up, we have one of my personal favorite shaders, Valkyrie Zero, which if you see on some of my my Titans, you can see actually a perfect example here in my helmet and my chestplate, actually, kind of, where it's basically a black and red, except it is a very dark blood red, and is a pretty consistent one. The only issue I ever have with it is that there's a lot of bright orange spots, which usually results in me using carbon blood for my marks because that's the main thing that's off-colored. But aside from that, we also have the Kairos Black, which is a one from Season of the Osiris, which is basically another Mercury Chrome style. And then we also have the War Cult scheme, which I think I've shown a few times in the same video. Basically, Future War Cult, white, purple, and yellowish golds. And with everything, that is basically the reset. Now, of course, this is the last of the season, aside from the TWID, and maybe covering the showcase, although by the time I get home from work, usually the showcase is done, and everything new and trailer-wise is done, and the new season is just there, and I should start working on the season. But on that note, my name is Matt Scorpion. Thank you for watching, and like I said, keep your eye out for the TWID, maybe one more video at the end of the season, and I will see you then.